नमामि भगवत्पादशङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। नमामि गौडपादं च शङ्करं श्रीसुरेश्वरं स्वामिनं सच्चिदानन्दमिन्द्रं तं ज्ञानरूपिणे। ओम ओम नारायण। Now today is Sunday, so we are discussing fourth chapter, the various yajnas we were discussing. Okay, so in that 28th shloka, around 5 yajnas are stated in one shloka. So dravya yajna we have already stated. Tapo yajna is enduring the sufferings with a yajna buddhi, as if as an offering to, as a service to Bhagavan, as a yajna, as a worship. See, offering some money, something material, as a devotional service, as a worship to Ishvara, that is yajna. But similarly, tapo yajna, enduring the suffering without complaining, but as a necessary worship, even that is a service to Bhagavan. So that becomes a yajna. That constitutes a yajna. Third is yoga yajna, practicing the yogic sadhanas, some of them. Then swadhyaya. Swadhyaya is 2 meanings we have stated. One is doing parayana, reading out certain prayerful texts. So we have two to three ways. One is directly recitation of Veda, recitation of even Bhagavad Gita, Sahasranamas, all these things we have stated. They can be simple prayers. The book which we recite could be simple prayers, or they could be Vedantic text also, like Upanishadic Parayana. Bhagavad Gita Parayana is not a prayer, it is teaching. Even the teaching also has that effect of prayer. So it can be, that too can be recited. Bhagavad Gita too can be recited. And 2 things, as I told you. One is the recitation of religious or spiritual texts. Second is properly. It should be done in a proper way. He says, Vidhipurvaka, he says. If you look at Anandagiri, how Anandagiri talked about it. Jnana yajnascha vidhipurvakam. Where is that? Vidhi manatikramya ityetat. Yatha vidhi, it should be done. The recitation, see, it should be done like a yajna. Recitation doesn't mean, see, in universities people may read out. So that reading is not yajna. It should be done like a ritual, like a prayer. That means after taking bath, facing the eastward, okay, when you face east, put a photograph of your Ishtadevata, or if you are doing in the temple, then directly Bhagavan is there, or in front of Guru, or you do it in a Punya Kshetra like Kashi or any holy places like this, in your or at least at your home, in your special puja room. That means the place should be clean, and the book also should not be put on the ground, as Indians know generally this. So we put the book which 2 things are there. One is the book which is available in the market will be just kept normally. Though there also you will have little respect for it, you don't put it on the ground. But the book, once you select it and keep it separately for your recitation, That book you won't put it on the ground, you put it in an elevated place, in a clean place, and also put flowers and do namaskara, because we believe that even the teaching, even the book also carries, book also is an avatara, is a form of Bhagavan, is Ishwaras. Because Ishwara's teaching is also Bhagavan only, because it comes from his heart. Therefore, we revere his teaching. The book also we revere and look upon it with respect. So that way you keep that and do recite it. Second thing is Vidhivat, he told. So the place, time, the way of reciting. The way of reciting also should be done with devotion and respect. In between, you are not supposed to get up and go for other things. Okay. See, when you start a recitation, each day certain portion you select for your recitation or reading out, chanting out. So during that chanting, you are not supposed to look at others and talking and do all those things. If you have to get up for some reason, you have to restart the whole thing from beginning. Because in one sitting it has to be done, maybe 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, it should be done in one sitting. Okay. So this is one recitation. Second is the japa, mantra japa. Take a small name of Ishvara, which Guru, preferably Guru has given you, and that you have to recite it. That you have to repeatedly do it. So it is a japa, mantra japa, chanting the mantra. So these two are called Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya is another yajna. So out of these many yajnas, some yajna appeals to certain type of mind, certain type of personality. Some yajna brings about devotion naturally. It becomes easy for him to think of Bhagavan through this kind of a yajna. For somebody, some other kind of yajna. But any one of yajna, you just once you choose it, you continue. Don't just keep on doing one day that, one day this thing, as a casually doing it. If you take up one yajna, do it regularly over a period of time, then only it goes deeply into your heart. Okay. So Dravya yajna, Tapo yajna, Yoga yajna, Swadhyaya jnana yajnascha. Swadhyaya yajna is over. Now comes the Jnana yajna. Jnana yajna here doesn't mean Vedanta vichara. See, Jnana word can mean two levels. One is self-enquiry. When you do self-enquiry, directly the Atma Jnanam. Atma Jnanam means in Atma Jnanam, in self-enquiry or Atma Vichara, your concentration is on understanding your Atma. There, the bookish knowledge is secondary, directly Anubhava Jnana. The experiential knowledge is important there. Okay. Therefore, Atma Vichara is Anubhava Rupa Jnana, or an experience. Directly you discover the Atma in your Anubhava. Here he is talking not that, just a bookish knowledge, a conceptual knowledge. Because conceptual knowledge also is sometimes advocated to a person who is not so much capable of directly doing Vedanta Vichara. Some people who are not directly, but people are some thinkers. It is useful for thinking people. Okay? For thinking people who try to listen to Vedantic ideas. See, the Vedantic ideas, understanding them in a proper spirit, even that makes your mind purer. Even that becomes a yajna. See, understanding of Vedanta, Vedantic philosophy, it also purifies a mind. It broadens your vision. So, understanding the truth is still deeper one. That requires inwardness of mind, vairagya, bhakti and purity of mind. That is a still higher step. But even this simple step of intellectual study, that means trying to understand conceptually Vedanta, even that makes you a little open-minded person. You can see a person whose understanding is little logical and convincing, is little open-minded compared to the person who is a dogmatic, rigid and hateful. Okay. At least it makes the mind open-minded person, makes the mind open. So, if you study Vedanta, even as a simple intellectual pursuit, conceptually also makes your outlook open. Even that continuous pursuit also is a yajna, jnana yajna. So this jnana yajna is two types. One is you listen to others and try to understand. It's just a conceptual understanding of Vedanta. And secondly, you share with others, you discuss others. At the end of the Bhagavad Gita, I think 67 or 68th shloka, last chapter, 18th chapter, Bhagavan Krishna advises his followers, those who listen to this also will become pure. They will win my heart of Bhagavan. Bhagavan will be pleased with that. Second is those who study and teach others. So this propagation of Bhagavad Gita, propagation means not propaganda, but the propagation word is in English and we have no other word, I don't know what else to say. In India it is doing a prachara. So not propaganda generally is misleading people, brainwashing people. But here when we say propagation, in Indian sense we are telling, we just, whatever you learnt your Shastra, you should go and teach it to others. See here, this is the 67th and 68th shloka of 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita towards the end. Some people claim that no, Hindus are not supposed to propagate, teach it to others. Therefore, Hinduism is not an evangelical religion. It is true. Evangelical means whether two Abrahamic religions, evangelical means they believe that all others go to hell unless they come to our belief, unless they believe exactly what I believe. And once you get baptism, once you get a baptism and then believe it and follow certain basic things, you belong to that group, and that is enough. Your heaven will be assured and your sin will go away, the original sin will go away. So by believing a dogma you propagate, and that propagation is a part of a dogma, otherwise you will go to hell. But here in Hindu Shastras also advocate the scholars to go and teach people. Okay, Hindu scholars, Hindu Shastras also advocate their gurus, if not guru, as a simple scholar also. A person who has some scholarly knowledge of Hinduism, who can explain convincingly to others, though it is intellectual, still he is a scholar, he can explain to others. He himself may not be mumukshu, may not have understood the truth in his anubhava, yet he can explain because he has studied the book. So even such people should go and teach others. Okay? Because this knowledge is a universal, it talks about human life, it talks about universal facts, therefore anybody can learn. Only when it comes to rituals, see, Hinduism doesn't propagate in the sense, see, a conversion, propagation implies that changing a person from one belief to another belief, one dogma to another dogma. Hinduism doesn't believe in this. Okay? But you can enlighten a person about a certain principle of life, the nature of Bhagavan and the nature of Jiva, how the world is born, and your relationship with your God. So there are certain basic principles, basic ideas which are universal facts, or at least they are convincing, logically convincing to anybody. Okay. So these ideas change your outlook to life. Therefore, this much of understanding, people generally we teach Hindus, but if a person who is a non-Hindu also can learn, because they are just principles. They are not dogmas. Dogma in the sense, dogma means even if it is illogical, you are supposed to believe. Okay. By dogma, even if it is illogical, you are supposed to believe. So this kind of a dogma, and they say their dogma alone saves you from original sin. First thing is there is no original sin. Okay. So there it is just a belief. and the belief is illogical, still you are supposed to believe. And for sake of belief, you should forego your logic, you should forego your common sense, common human sense you should forego, and still you have to become just a fanatic or bigot. Okay, so that is a religion. So this person himself is a fanatic. He believes an illogical dogma, and this illogical dogma also teaches that if you don't believe in this, or if you believe a different way of prayer, you will go to hell only. So this kind of fanaticism makes you impose on others. So first thing it says that people believing God in different way, in different form, in different form they worship, whatever worship they have, they are destined to hell only. So this makes a person fanatic and a propagator, a propagandist, not propagator, a propagandist. Okay, evangelist. So that is only a foolishness, because this comes out of hatred, or out of a very rigid, foolish belief, illogical belief, out of insecurity, because this false dogma gives you insecurity in your mind, and also it is accompanied by hatred for other ideas, other forms of prayer. Even if it is a sincere prayer, also you have to suppose it to hate. So it comes from intolerance and hatred. Therefore, that kind of propagation we don't have. Any propagation coming from fanaticism, issuing from fanaticism, as well as for hatred and intolerance for other ideas. So that kind of propagation we don't have. When Hindus teach others, generally you see, if a person is not much exposed to religion, we teach him directly. If a person has already some kind of, because within Hinduism we have got many ways, many forms, many rituals, many traditions we have. So people of all traditions come and listen to us. If I teach, if I give a public talk, people of other traditions also come, Vaishnava, Shaiva, all kinds of people come and listen to us. So there are certain basic principles like dharma and human values, spiritual values, they are common to everywhere. Okay, respect for your form of God, Rama, Krishna, Shiva, whichever form you mean, but the basic reverence for God is common. So we take that reverence and apply it to your idea of God. If you are a Rama Bhakta, I am a Shiva Bhakta, or somebody is Devi Bhakta. So the reverence I teach, so you relate to your God or goddess, the reverence, the devotion is same. When I teach devotion, one way is we teach devotion in common. Or sometimes I apply devotion to my God of Shiva, and then you listen to, if you are a Rama Bhakta, devotee of Rama, you listen to the same devotion, same intensity, same simplicity, same purity of devotion, but you apply it to Rama. You feel for your Rama. So even if he is a Rama Bhakta, he listens to my teaching of Shiva Bhakti. So we don't find any contradiction, because Shiva also is not against Rama Bhakta, and Rama is also not against Shiva Bhakta, because Rama and Shiva are not two. They are two aspects, two manifestations of the same. Therefore, this way, even if a person belonging to other tradition come and listen, so when he listens, how will he listen? He listens to the basic value of devotion, the purity of mind, how sincerely, with your wholeheartedness, with your pure mind, you surrender your heart, your ego to your God, and see a devotional relationship with your God. He enjoys it, he applies it to Rama, and he is also equally happy. He doesn't feel offended that I am talking of only Shiva, and I don't say that I talk of only Shiva and I hate Rama. And you also say, and if you are a Rama Bhakta, oh, I hate this Shiva and therefore I won't go. If this is not a part of teaching. This is a part of human weakness. This is a part of ego. This is a part of hatred. Hatred is a part of no religion, no teaching. Okay. Hatred is a part of no religion, no teaching. It belongs to the human weaknesses. It is a part of fanaticism or bigotry. Bigotry and fanaticism is a no religion, no tradition, no spirituality. Therefore, then that fellow belongs to other god. He worships other god. Therefore, I must convert him. Otherwise, he will go to hell. Then I become intolerant. This doesn't exist. Then where is the question of evangelism or propaganda? It is not a propaganda. It is just inspiring, guiding, leading. Therefore, we say it is an education. There is a difference between propaganda and education. Propaganda is motivated one. Telling lies, false. You use fraud and lies and hatred, brainwashing and emotionally working up. You create a emotion, emotionally fanatic. You make a person fanatic of one thing alone. You give the one-side picture, false picture, and create a hatred for others. This is propaganda. But when you say spiritual teaching, it is educating the person, inspiring, telling the facts. In fact, while we talking, you must have seen Hindus. They take care that, please don't miss it. See, they say like this. Suppose I am talking of Krishna or Rama. Hey, don't feel offended if you are a believer of Jesus or any other, your own concept of God, your own idea. Don't feel that I am against it. I'm only just telling because I am used to this. So you can apply it to yours. They specifically make this comment. Hindus make specially this. See? That's why we include Krishna, Rama, Shiva, Devi, Lalita, because all of them mean the same. And sometimes some people little more they add also. Suppose I am talking of Ramayana and I have to add Lalita. I add little bit of description of Lalita also. A few minutes I just talk of Lalita. A few minutes I talk of Rama. Few minutes I talk of Shiva also. So these Rama Bhaktas don't feel offended. They feel equally happy. So here we are only molding the mind of the student, mind of a religious student, sadhaka, how to purify it, how to inspire him, how to, turn his attention towards God, and all these things we just so. So this is what is emphasized. These basic principles of religion and prayer and devotion, the essential principles are taught. Is therefore, it is an educating a person, inspiring, educating, explaining, guiding, and removing his misunderstanding, correcting his illogical thinking and illogical emotions. So fanaticism is an emotion, is an illogical emotion. It is a perverted emotion based upon illogical thing. Bigotry, all these things are misguided emotion, misled emotion, wrongly directed emotions. But thing is, even for a common man, even for an ordinary man, not even a religious person, emotions are supposed to be healthy and logical. Okay. Even for an ordinary human beings, we are supposed to have a clean sentiments, not contradicting wild and violent sentiments. Okay. Wild and violent. So even for a common man, emotions are not supposed to be wild and violent. Okay. Impulsive. Wild and violent means impulsive emotions. Then for a religious man, definitely they have to be purer enough. You can't have impulsive feelings, impulsive ideas. They have to be pure and loving, and because love for any therefore generally we see devotee of any god, any form of god, generally his emotions are purified. They are not wild and impulsive. They are not violent. They are very subdued, regulated, purified. Therefore, any devotee of any god will always love to see another devotee of God. A devotee of another form of God, if he comes, we generally, we stand up. We stand up and with reverentially do namaskara to him, invite him. Sometimes they even worship the gurus, worship the sadhakas of the other form also, because their blessing will be useful to us. If he is a Shiva Bhakta, and we receive his blessing and tell him, I am a Rama Bhakta, please bless me to have my bhakti for Rama. And he is a Shiva Bhakta, and he blesses, okay, have your bhakti for Rama, let your bhakti be purified and advanced, and you grow well and you will attain your Rama. He is a Shiva Bhakta, but he blesses me. He doesn't curse me. He doesn't hate me. He doesn't send me to hell. And if I am a Rama Bhakta, I shall also bless him. If he is a Shiva Bhakta, okay, let your bhakti for Shiva continue. Your bhakti for Devi continue. Let it be purified and deepened. Basically, your personality should be healthy personality, not violent and wild emotions, impulsive emotions. And your thoughts, idea of God should be very broad idea. Ishvara is all pervasive. Bhagavan is all pervasive, he is all accommodative. He appears in different forms. He is kind towards all people. Even to his atheist, he is kind-hearted. Even to the person who doesn't believe him also still he is kind-hearted. Because if the man is immature, ignorant and a fanatic person, why should God become fanatic? God is a mature person, he is all omniscient and he is the purest man, he is the purest being on the earth. Therefore, Ishvara himself, who is a creator of the world, who is a sustainer, creator and dissolver, who dissolves into him, he doesn't hate anybody. He only understands he is a too immature fellow, he takes some more time to learn devotion. So, God doesn't curse even if he is an atheist, even if he worships in a different form. Therefore, this idea of God, this understanding of God you teach. Now tell me, can this be called evangelism? And now if this kind of teaching Hindus teach, but they are not prohibited to teach others. Hindus are not prohibited. They think that, oh, Hindus don't teach others, Hindus don't convert. We don't convert, that is true, but we don't. Conversion doesn't mean, but we don't refuse to give Diksha. We give Diksha, we guide them, lead them, inspire them. That we are supposed to do. See, Bhagavad Gita, at the end of the 18th chapter, I told you, 67th, 68th verse, shloka, Sri Krishna advises people, go and teach this to people. Go and teach this to people, those who are in need of this teaching. You are not disturbing anybody's devotion. See, you are not disturbing anybody's devotion. You are not misguiding them, misleading them. In whatever form, in whatever ritual he does it, you are only inspiring him, guiding him. You are putting him in a right track. The devotion in a right way. Therefore, you can teach anybody, anywhere in the world. So, Hindus are not prohibited. In fact, Lord Krishna, Bhagavan Krishna encourages us to go and teach anybody. Therefore, whom should you teach? There is no whom, whoever needs. Any human being needs a religious teaching and teach him. Oh, what about the people belonging to other religion? There is no such thing called other religion. Okay. In Hindus, we have no word of other religion. Religion is religion. You are religion or irreligion, that's all. There is no other religion. Other religion is also religion only. It is something like there are two ways to reach Bangalore from here. I am in Holy Narspura now. One is a straight road, another is you go little round through Mysore. But even that is a path. You go little round, but that is also a path. There is no question of other religion is irreligion. Other religion only means he goes in a different way, a different route he takes, and again he comes to the same thing. But that's also religion. Why do you want to offend him? Why do you want to condemn him and offend him just because he takes a little round route? Some people go shortcut, some people go little round. Let him go little round, so what? He is coming to the same thing. He is basically inclined towards God and inclined towards his own spiritual sadhana. Let him continue. Therefore, whether he goes by a shortcut, whether he goes little round, still he is a bhakta, he is a devotee. Let him come. So our teaching will be useful to him. And supposing if a person is a disciple of, a follower of one guru, he happens to attend a public talk of another guru. And the guru's teachings also, most of them are relevant to my life and take it. But a few ritualistic aspect, a ritualistic prayers or these things, he tells somewhat differently. We listen and we leave him. He says, oh, he is referring to that Devi Bhakta. And those rituals apply to Devi, those rules apply to Devi Bhakta. So some of those things which do not apply, which are not relevant to my Rama Bhakti sadhana, I just leave them. I don't feel offended. I just leave them. Oh, he's talking of their bhakti. I'll just ignore them and I take other aspects and come away. There is no question of no. If you accept, you must accept every word of me. If you reject one word of me, you are not my follower. We don't have this kind of thinking. This kind of thinking we just don't, we never had even thousands of years. In fact, right from childhood, nobody taught us like that. Only when we hear these things, oh, we are surprised. How can people be like that? Because we were never taught that way. Most orthodox, rigid people also were never taught like that. Even my father, mother was the most orthodox, rigid people. But their rigidity is only in their personal discipline. Rigidity means we follow very strictly your own discipline. That's what it means. But if other person comes, we provide him, we make all facilities for him. We don't, in fact, we feel that, oh, I am bhakta of this way, my ritual way may offend him. Oh, let me say, in fact, we take his permission. Oh, can I follow these rituals? So we don't offend him. We don't offend him, and we take permission and do it, continue it. So in fact, we are sensitive, feel that we don't want to offend him, we don't want to hurt him. Safe, because he is a devotee and he respects a devotee in another form. Therefore, if such a teaching, you are free. In fact, you can teach anywhere. That's why Hindus are free to teach. That's why they don't offend anybody. They can teach anywhere in the world. And I tell you, some of these missionaries and these mullahs, they say that no, they are teaching Hindus. That means they are trying to insult our religion. So we ban, we oppose it, we condemn it and all those things. Oh, we are minority, we have no protection. Our religion is disturbed. Then the government comes and controls Hindus. Oh, Hindus are spoiling other people. Don't teach them, don't allow them. And this is the roti, this is now started doing it. And our Hindu people also are unable to understand, oh yes, we should not disturb them. As if Hindus are disturbing. Do you show any Hindu who can go and disturb others? See? Does Hindu go and disturb anybody? Then why this kind of banning? So Hindus who are non-fanatic, non-dogmatic is interpreted as dogmatic and say, it is your religion, don't teach us. It is your ritual, don't do it in front of me. Because I feel offended. I've got my religious freedom. And my religious freedom means I should not see your ritual. You are not supposed to do it in front of me because you are hurting me. They interpret, they impose non-existing fanaticism on Hinduism as fanaticism. They impose on us and they try to ban. They ban, in fact, in India, they are giving trouble now. They keep on condemning, criticizing, and international media. Oh, even from America we get messages here. Oh, Hindus are too aggressive. They are imposing on Muslims and Christians. Their minorities are feeling helpless. They are unable to live. What is their religion? They want to convert forcibly by fraud and telling lies. They want to condemn and hate Hinduism, hate Hindu gods. And if we don't allow it, we are condemned that, oh, there is no religious freedom. Religious freedom means they are supposed to hate Hindu gods. And that hatred they want to teach to Hindus only. They want to teach hatred to Hindu gods, hatred of Hindu gods to Hindus. If we don't allow, we are considered as fanatics. We are considered as bigots. Oh my God, poor minorities are suffering and they are unable to live their free life. They are unable to practice their religion. Hindus are so aggressive fanatics. This is what the international media tells. In fact, I don't have to talk all these things, but I think some of the people should know these things, what is going on. As if we are aggressive and we are hurting them, and Hindus are very aggressive, hurting, and they are not giving religious freedom to others. Okay, this is what is explained. And some of the Hindus also, without knowing these detailed things, yes, we should not hurt others. Oh, I'm sorry, we should not hurt others. Don't teach, don't practice anything here. That's why Hindus, they say, you see, this tilaka, this tilaka, this kumkum you are seeing, this vibhuti, you see them. Oh, we are not supposed to show them. It is insult to non-Hindus. Therefore, wipe out. See, when they come out of the house, they wipe out and go. Because we are hurting them. See, this saffron robe which I wear, if I come onto the streets, oh, they say, hey, you are hurting others. You are not supposed to wear. Wear the clothes and stay inside the house. Don't come out because you will be hurting others. What is this? Hindus are artificially made fanatics, interpreted as fanatics. And Hindus are claiming, no, Hinduism doesn't believe in evangelism and conversion. It is true, we don't convert, but we teach spirituality. If somebody wants one Ishtadevata of Rama, Krishna, Shiva or Devi, he can take Diksha and practice. He can take Diksha of Krishna, Devi, Rama, Shiva, anybody and practice. But doesn't make him fanatic. Because the principle of God, the idea of God is same. They say, no, our God is same. Our God means, our God implies, our God means our monotheistic God. Our monotheistic God means your Rama is not God. Therefore, how can we learn Rama God? How can we learn Shiva and Devi? See how they talk. They are fanatics and they impose fanaticism on others, and we are supposed to accept that yes, we are fanatics. We Hindus are fanatics. They brand us and we are supposed to accept. If we don't accept it, we are wicked people. See, now you understand the difference, what is going on in the world? How the missionaries' interpretation? Missionaries say, yours is Hindu God. Don't teach us, don't impose us. If Hindus say that, no, you are imposing us, we have no religious freedom. Therefore, it is your Hindu God is a separate, it is your God, it's not ours. But we are not telling, doesn't matter, we are telling you, you are fanatics. So, Christians can't imagine any other non-fanatic God, non-fanatic religions. Therefore, they must brand Hinduism also as a fanatic religion. Okay. They must brand. And not only they brand, Hindus are supposed to accept their branding that we are fanatics. We are supposed to accept what they brand. Now tell me, this is called religious freedom. This is called religious freedom. Strange thing on the life, on the earth. All strange logic alone is logic. Fanaticism, if a fanatic interprets, that alone is fanaticism. Okay? And if he says, that alone is logic. These monotheistic people, whatever they interpret, we are supposed to accept it. If you don't, then we are wicked people. Oh, this is a ridiculous thing. Okay? Therefore, this propaganda of these monotheistic religions, two sides they say, oh, Hindus are converting people. See, in India they say, some of the Europeans and Americans becoming Hindus. They say, hey, you are also converting. See, many Americans and Europeans are taking to Hinduism. Then when you are converting, we convert India. We wipe out Hinduism from India. Because you Hindus are coming out of India and then trying to teach Europeans and Americans, then we will teach you. See, I say this is unequal. Hindus can teach anywhere in the world. You should not prevent. No UNO, nobody should prevent them. But the problem is, they brand us and they take freedom that they have got every right to destroy Hinduism. In Hinduism, one more thing. If you are a Shiva Bhakta, you go to his house, you see in his puja room, in his room where he does everyday rituals and rituals. He is Shiva Bhakta, but he keeps Rama, Devi, everything. He keeps Vinayaka, Subramanya, he keeps others also. If he is a Rama Bhakta or Krishna Bhakta, you can see him Shiva, he puts there also. And then Shivaratri comes, the special days of Shiva, he does the Shiva Puja. We do Shivaratri here. We grandly celebrate Shivaratri here. And our Swamiji took Rama Mantra and also Shiva Mantra. He would do Parayana for Shiva Purana and also Rama Bhakti. Our Sachidananda Swamiji did both, Shiva as well as Rama. He took two mantras and he composed bhajans on Rama Bhakti and Shiva Bhakti both. And he teaches about Krishna also. So, if you take one form, we include other forms also, because our God is an all-pervasive, includes everybody. So if you worship Shiva, your devotion, your worship to Rama is as good as done. It is as good as included in Shiva. Your devotion to Rama is included. So Rama also blesses you. If you are a Shiva Bhakta, Rama blesses, Devi blesses you. If you are a Devi Bhakta, Shiva blesses, Rama blesses, Krishna also blesses. Krishna doesn't say that, no, I won't bless you. Because Krishna is not different from Devi. Lalita and Krishna all are same. Therefore, Krishna also includes his blessing. He sends his blessing. Now tell me, where is the problem now? Where is the problem? We continue like before. Therefore, if this kind of teaching, Hindus are free, I think Hindus should be welcome to teach anywhere in the world, to any people of any religion. Okay? We should not be prevented. So therefore, Lord Krishna says, Bhagavan Krishna at the end of the 18th chapter, you go and teach this. This is Jnana Yajna. I am very much pleased with you if you do it. Because in the process of teaching, you will be again and again thinking of those good concepts, those impartial, logical and also very broad-minded ideas of Bhagavan, ideas of world, ideas of Jiva, life, what is Punarjanma, what is Moksha, what is Karma, all these things, what is rebirth, all these ideas, you think more and more, your mind becomes purer. You develop devotion, you follow dharma. Okay. Therefore, even if it is a simple conceptual idea, even if it is a scholarship, still if you go and teach others, you will be doing a yajna, jnana yajna, I am pleased with you. Then gradually I will give you vairagyam. You will become a real seeker of truth. Then you will be a real self-inquiry, you will do it and you will understand the truth. See? So, a person who teaches to others, not imposes, he says clearly, not imposing, see his mind, his capacity, his level of understanding, accordingly teach them, don't impose. So this is a Jnana Yajna, I am pleased. So Jnana Yajna is two. What you know, you share with others and you teach. Second thing is, you also learn. You also learn is one Jnana Yajna. You go and teach it to others, this is also Jnana Yajna. Jnana Yajna. Yajna means a Yajna of knowledge. So basic thing is no hatred, no bigotry. Religion begins with that. The very ritual, very prayers, anything, if you have a hatred, if you are intolerant, it is not at all a religion, it is worse than atheism. It is worse than atheism. Because there is no devotion. Where there is an intolerance and hatred, where there is a fanaticism, there can't be devotion. There can't be bhakti. Because the hatred consumes you. The intolerance eats away your mind and you have no heart for devotion. Then there is no religion, no ritual at all. Okay, so Jnana Yajna is teaching it to people who are in need of it, who do not know. Therefore, teaching it to Hindus, teaching it to even non-Hindus, teaching it to anywhere, according to his need, according to his level. Not imposing, not controlling, not trying to dominate and brainwash him and create hatred in him. Not that. So, according to his maturity level, according to his need, teach certain rituals. Sometimes ritual may be different, but the devotion behind the ritual is same. Okay? The devotion, the value, the spiritual value, the spiritual idea is same. Its expression may vary from ritual to ritual. So, this way you learn, you think, you try to understand the concept of rebirth and then karma and then your concept of God, all these things you try to logically understand. So, even this understanding is a yajna and teaching it to others is also yajna. Okay, this is called Jnana Yajna. Therefore, Jnana Yajnaha Jnanam Shastrartha Parigyanam. See Bhashyakara, Shankaracharya says here, Jnana Yajna. Jnanam is a yajna. What is Jnanam? Shastrartha Parigyanam Yajna. Understanding the concepts of religion very clearly. Even if you intellectually understand, you cannot have hatred and intolerance. See, therefore it becomes a yajna. It becomes a yajna because even if it is intellectual, it makes your mind a little open. It doesn't allow you to hate, doesn't allow you to be egoistic. It makes you a simple man. Therefore, even that is a yajna. Jnana Yajna is a yajna. Okay, yajna yesham te jnana yajna. Ten yajnas are talked about. Now I think 11th or 12th, 2 more yajnas are left out. So in the 28th ending, one more word is there, one small phrase, yatayas samshita vrataha. Who practice all these things? Those who sincerely, wholeheartedly practice. So this sincerity, wholeheartedness and love and devotion to Bhagavan, this is common to any kind of yajna, any kind of prayer, any ritual, any yajna. The basic good heart, a simple heart, loving heart, egoless heart is necessary for any ritual anywhere. If that is compromised, then it is no more a ritual. It's no more a devotion. Okay. Therefore, yatayaha, yati means sadhakas. Yatayas samshita vrata. That means they sharpen their mind. Sharpening means they purify the mind, and also tikshni krutani vatani. They take their yajna along with certain discipline, certain values. See, any ritual, any prayer should always be accompanied by basic human values. If you compromise basic human values, no ritual is perfect. No ritual will bear fruit. No God will be pleased if you cheat, tell lies, if you cheat people, do injustice to people, appropriate others' money and others' property, quarrel with people, hate them. This, if such a person will not be blessed by, your ritual won't be successful, and your God, whomever you worship, you pray to, will not give the result, will not give the positive good results if you don't follow these basic human values, basic natural human values. So natural basic human values and also religious values, natural human feelings and also special ritualistic feeling, religious feeling. Religious feeling doesn't mean Hindu religious feeling. Don't attribute to that fanaticism. Hatred is a religious feeling for them. No, hatred can't be. Therefore, this jnana yajna, people follow not only jnana yajna, all these 10 yajnas talked about in the previous shlokas. Sadhakas can take up any one of them, or sometimes 2 of them. You can combine 2 or 3 depending upon your need, and by continuously practicing for a length of time, mind becomes sharp in the sense gentle and also observant. The mind should be capable of gaining insight. That insight means a deeper vision. It should be able to probe deeply into it and discover. A mind requires a very unprejudiced, open mind, a sattvika mind. Therefore, these yajnas, followers of these yajna, yatayaha, yati means sadhu, sannyasi. But yati also can mean any sadhaka. Even if he is not a sannyasi, still he is a sadhaka. Okay, yatayaha means those who practice, the practicants. Therefore, so yatayaha samshita vrataha, the sadhakas who sharpen their mind, purify their mind, make it very alert and then sharply ready to observe the very subtle point in life. Mind should be capable of observing. Otherwise, people out of insecurity, love and hatred, pain and pleasure and all these things, worldly lives and worldly experiences disturb the person. They add impurity to the mind, so you will go away from God. You won't be able to understand and feel for Him. Okay, yatayas samshita vrataha. So samshita, they are sharpened and purified. This applies to all the yajnas so far talked about it. Now we got another next 29th and 30th shloka. With these 2, we complete all the yajnas. Okay, apaneju. Now this 29th shloka is talking about pranayama. I read out 29th. Apane juhvati pranam. Pranam is this breath. Breath is called pranam. When you what you call inhale, what happens? Your breath is going inside and touching the apana. Apana means it is moving towards downwards, moving towards down. Therefore, apane juhvati pranam. Prana is breath. Those people who inhale, apane juhvati pranam means inhalation. Those who inhale. Prane panam tatha pare. This is exhale. Okay. This is a technical way of telling. The shloka is touching inhalation and exhalation. First part of it, apane juhvati pranam, those who inhale. Next sentence, prane panam tatha pare, and certain others do exhalation. Okay, puraka rechaka we call it. And then the prana pana gati rudva, another is the movement of the breath, you suspend it. That means you stop it. Gati means movement. Prana pana gati rudva, the movement of prana having stopped it. Pranayama parayana. Those who are dedicated to pranayama, those who want to practice pranayama, such people pranayama yogis, not complete yogis, ashtanga yogi, but only pranayama yogis, they practice like this. Puraka inhalation, rechaka exhalation, then another is kumbhaka. Pranayama rudva. Prana, they stop it. Prana means what? The moving, outgoing, incoming breath, just stop it. This is kumbhaka. So puraka, rechaka, kumbhaka. Puraka means inhalation. Rechaka means exhalation. Inhale, exhale, and another is stop the breath wherever you are. Just to remain. This is kumbhaka. So these two put together pranayama. Pranayama is also a yajna because pranayama releases the stiffness in your muscles and nervous system. It makes your brain and mind very relieved and relaxed. So in that relaxed, positive, good mind, one can do easily Vedanta Vichara. Okay, so in this 29th shloka is talking of 3 pranayama. Puraka, Rechaka, Kumbhaka. Even Shankaracharya says, Shankara Bhasha, he takes the name and then writes it, you see. So pranayama gati rudva, having stopped the movement of prana either after breathing in or after breathing out. As long as you can do, as long as you means that you can do up to 15-20 minutes, 20-25 minutes one can do. So this 29th shloka talks of pranayama as a yajna. Now the last yajna comes in the 30th shloka. Apare niyatahara pranan praneshu juhvati. Apare, certain others practice this yoga. Niyatahara, they regulate their food. They neither fast completely nor overeat. They just necessarily maintain the health, and also the mind should not eat the food. If mind eats the food, it becomes dependent on food. So let the mind doesn't feel that it is missing anything. Okay, niyatahara, just a regulated food, a temperate, a moderate food you take it. The quality, quantity and the type of food, all that has to be regulated with the help of Shastra. So those who take that niyatahara pranan praneshu juhvati. Niyatahara means they do partial fasting so that body mind will have little energy, and also they feel very what you call light and comfortable. Light, comfortable and relaxed. Okay, so these sense organs are niyataharaha pranan praneshu juhvati. Then the prana means indriyas. Praneshu in the inner prana. So these sense organs are applied to the prana. Okay, pranayama apare niyatahara pranan praneshu juhvati sarve pyete yajna vido. All these 12 yajnas I talked about them. So all these people who follow this yajna vidaha, they know what is the yajna. What is real yajna? They alone know, who do any one of these yajnas wholeheartedly by applying your heart. Otherwise, his mind doesn't become purer. So yajna kshapita kalmasha. A person who does any of these yajna, either one or two, that person yajna kshapita kalmasha, his papas, his impurities of mind, religious demerits will go away. Mind becomes very light, comfortable, and spontaneously capable of devotion, spontaneously capable of doing tattva vichara and understand the truth. So, sarve pete yajna vidoho. All these yajna vids. Yajna vid means knower of yajnas. All the knower of these various yajnas. What happens? These various people who follow any of these yajnas, yajna kshapita kalmasha, their religious demerits, their papas will go away. Papas get wiped out, and he remains a purer person. Sarve pete yajna vidaha yajna kshapita kalmasha. Okay, kalmasha, the impurities of mind are removed by these yajnas. Yajna shishta amrita bhujo yanti brahma sanatanam. 31st shloka we say and then stop. Okay, a little 2 minutes, 2 to 3 sentences. Yajna shishta amrita bhuja yanti brahma sanatanam. A person having performed any of these yajna, that means your very life, interactions, thoughts, activities, all these things should be a worship to Bhagavan, a prayerful service to Bhagavan, a devotional service to Bhagavan. So yajna shishta amrita bhujaha, a person having done this yajna, mind becomes pure. Whatever experiences, whatever worldly pleasures, money, status given by God, receive them humbly as a blessing of God, and then use it for your life and for your family members. A person who lives like that, yajna shishta amrita bhujaha. Bhujaha, one who eats. Amrutam, what is amrutam? Yajna shishtam. After performing yajna, any of these yajnas, when whatever comes as a result, the result of yajna is called yajna prasada. And the same thing is called amruta. Here Bhagavad Gita says yajna shishtamruta. After performing yajna, whatever remains, that becomes purified by the blessing of God. Therefore, yajna shishtamruta bhujaha yanti brahma sanatanam. They will purify their mind. At a later stage, they will do tattva vichara and then come to realize that I am Brahman, aham brahmasmi. Nayam lokostya yajnasya kutonyah kuru sattama. A person who doesn't live his life as a yajna, any of these yajna, any one of these yajna at least, a person whose life is not lived as a yajna, what happens to him? Sarve pete yajna vido yajna kshapita kalmashaha nayam lokostya yajnasya. He can't live life peacefully and happily, even this life, then where is the question of other life, other world, next world? Therefore, a person's life should become a yajna. Yajna is an ideal. If you don't do it, what happens? Sarve peshe yajna vido yajna kshapita kalmashaha nayam lokosti. Even this worldly life will not be peaceful and happy to him. He won't have a peaceful life, because with prejudice, ego and all that thing, who will adjust to him? Nobody will adjust with him. He'll ultimately become frustrated. Therefore, nayam lokoscha yajnasya. For an ayajna who doesn't perform yajna, for such people, not even this loka, he can't have a good happy life in this life. Then what to talk of the other worldly life? Okay. Evam bahuvida yajna vitata brahmano mukhe. This is another point, next point. I think next to 2 shlokas. 2 and 3. 2 to 3 shlokas together. we have to learn, then we get an idea. That we'll see in the next class. Before that, I tell you a small announcement. We have a Swamiji's Jayanti Saptaha beginning from this day after tomorrow, Tuesday, and it will run up to next Monday, that is 11th. So 5th, today is 4th, I suppose, or 3rd. Today is 3rd. Yes. So 4th, 5th. So from the 5th January to 11th January, we have a Saptaha here. So about Swamiji and his teaching, I shall speak, and others also will speak. These talks will be purely in Kannada only. Okay, because everybody can't come here due to corona virus. So they will listen on online, and they will be telecast on our Adhyatma Prakasha YouTube site is separate, not on my these things. It will be on YouTube directly live telecast from our Adhyatma Prakasha website is there. So that it will be telecast through that. There are you must be, almost all of you might be already members. Otherwise, you can subscribe to it and then you can listen to them. It is going to be in Kannada. So the same timings will be followed there. Therefore, we won't be able to have these classes, this Sugama, Vedanta Paribhasha, and then Gita, Paramartha Chintamani for 1 week holidays for our classes. So our class will begin after this Saptaha is over. Next, when is that? 12th. 12th we shall start. Our 12th, I think, will be Vedanta Paribhasha, we will start. Until then, Sugama, Gita, all these things, these English talks and also Kannada talks will be suspended during this 1 week. Okay, note this and keep in your mind. And then only our next class will be on Tuesday. Okay. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om Tat Sat.